O projeto Pretzel nasceu com a intenção de ser um jeito inovador de se comunicar. Surge um momento de um contexto conturbado, ou seja, no meio da pandemia, e havia e ainda há uma profusão de conteúdos que estão sendo disponibilizados virtualmente online. A concepção deste projeto foi uma iniciativa da Associação dos Amigos da Universidade Hebraica de Jerusalém, em parceria com a Sinagoga Beth-El, e conta com o apoio institucional do Clube A Hebraica e do Museu Judaico de São Paulo. Agradecemos aos patrocinadores e apoiadores que têm nos ajudado a viabilizar esse projeto. Destacamos o Grupo Rossetti. Espero que desfrutem dessa entrevista. Peter, welcome. Thank you very much for accepting our invitation. How are you?
Very good. Thank you very much for having me, and greetings from Israel, from Tel Aviv in Israel.
Good. Welcome again. So let's start. We're going to have some questions. I'm going to make some questions to you, and you're going to answer, okay?
Sure.
First, tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're born and where you do currently live.
I was originally born in New York in 1957 in New York City. My parents were immigrants from Europe, and I lived in New York for most of my life, for my younger life. And then I came to Israel on and off over the years because we had a lot of family in Israel. And I've been living here permanently now for, let's see, about 32 years. When my son was 6 months old, we came back to live in Israel for good. And I live in Givatayim, which is a suburb of Tel Aviv.
How was your life in the United States? Where did you live? Tell me a little bit about this.
Well, I'll tell you a little bit about my family and my background, because my parents have an interesting story. My father's from Ukraine, from Romania, from Chernovitz, which was in Romania at the time. Today it's Ukraine. He had a very Zionist upbringing with the Shomer Tza'ir. And obviously the war came and ruined a lot of what was happening with him. So he was able to go underground and get to Italy. He arrived in Italy. My mother came from Hungary. My mother was actually in Hungary. She went through the whole war in Hungary. Her and her sister hid out in Budapest. They're from Debrecen. And after the war, she wanted to come and make Aliyah, to immigrate to Palestine. And she came through to Italy. And my father at the time was working for the Jewish Agency. And he was helping all the Jews immigrate from the Jews who came to Italy to help them go to Palestine at the time. And my mother was there, and they met. And they didn't have a common language, because my father knew Russian, he knew Yiddish, he knew a few languages, and my mother didn't know Yiddish, because at the time, most of the Hungarian people were pretty integrated into society, and they didn't really know Yiddish very much. But the two of them met, and 3 weeks later, they got married. So they got married in Italy, and they ended up living in Italy. My father sent much of his family, his two sisters and his mother, to Palestine, to Israel. And he also sent my mother's father to Palestine, to Israel. But they stayed in Italy. They stayed in Italy through the war, and they stayed in Italy for also 10 years after that. My father would go to Israel every year to visit the family there. He had a very nice life in Rome. He would bring fruits and vegetables to Palestine, to Israel at the time. Israel was a very difficult situation in the 1950s. He would sell a lot of it for his boat passage. The rest of it he would give to the family. And then the story is, my sister was born in Italy, in Rome. And the story is, when she was 4 years old, she passed a church and she went like this. So they said, now it's time to leave Italy and to go to the Holy Land. And they decided to go to America. So they came to America, and I was born in New York. And that's the story. Ironically, a few years ago, we got all the paperwork from the Joint. They came to America with the Joint. I didn't realize this, but they spent 10 years in Italy as stateless people. They had no citizenship. They had no rights. They were refugees in Italy. You think today of the Palestinian refugees, but you have to realize that after the war, many Jews were refugees. And until they didn't come to America, and they were there and they got citizenship in the United States, and the United States accepted them and everything, they were refugees who were just trying to find a place to live and to live a life. And I was born in America. I was their Jew that was born in America and lived life as an American.
That's great. That's a fascinating story. Thank you. Thank you to share with us. That's That's really fascinating for us. And tell me a little bit, what you do you like or and dislike the most about in our Eretz Israel? So that you long time that you live there.
Yes, I've been here for a very long time. I don't regret it. We came here when my first daughter was born in New York. She actually, I was during my childhood, growing up in the United States. We came to visit Israel often. We came in 1961 when I was 4 years old. That was the first time we came by boat. We actually came in 1967, 2 weeks after the Six-Day War. And I was 10 years old at the time, and I was in Israel the whole summer. And to be in Israel in the summer of 1967 was just euphoria. The country was fantastic, was enthusiastic. We went to Jerusalem. My father took his mother and his sisters to Jerusalem. My father was the American, the rich American who came to Israel in 1967. He took the whole family to Jerusalem. We went to Jerusalem. We went to Ramallah. We went to Hebron. We went to Bethlehem. We went to all the places where for the first time Israelis could go. And even the Palestinians there were very happy because all of a sudden they had tourists and everything coming there. Israel was an incredible sensation then. I came back from Israel to America. My wall in my room was plastered with pictures of Moshe Dayan and Tzahal and Kol HaKavod LeTzahal and what a great victory it was. And it was a very enthusiastic kind of period of time. The second thing that happened in 1969, I was a child growing up in New York, and I became a baseball fan. And the New York Mets, in 1969, they were called the Miracle Mets. So the Mets won the World Series in 1969, and I was very enthusiastic about that. So those two things, when I was 10 years old and when I was 12 years old, are where my life is today. Because today I'm living in Israel. I'm involved in baseball in Israel. Here's the symbol of it. And by chance, those two things that happened 50 years ago is where I am today. So afterwards we visited very often. In 1973 I came, just before the Yom Kippur War. Israel was then a much different country afterwards. I came again in 76 and in 79. And I did my studies in the United States. And after my studies in the United States, I came to Israel and I did my master's degree in Israel. I met the woman who is today my wife. We got married in Israel. And then we decided to come back to America for 1 year. I wanted to bring her back. She's Israeli. I wanted to bring her back to see the family, to get to know the family. So 1 year became 5 years. And you know how these things happen. It develops and you stay there. And one daughter was born in the States and a second son was born. And when he was 6 months old in 1989, we moved back to Israel and we've been in Israel since. I love Israel. You know, I mean, I'm a Zionist at heart. My father was a Zionist. They say this, the sign of a Zionist is somebody who sends his son to Israel. So my father was a Zionist because he sent me to Israel. And I'm living there today. And I love it. I love the enthusiasm. I love the warmth, the balagan, people who know Hebrew, the big mess. But everybody is so warm. Everybody is so warm and together and doing one thing. I don't like the politics so much. That's what draws us apart. But as the Jewish people, being in Israel, living in Israel as the Jewish people, it's the Jewish homeland. I am not religious, but I believe in the Jewish heritage very much. And for me, that Jewish heritage and being there and being part of Israel and being part of the Jewish people and building something, you know, I also feel American. I mean, it's ironic, but in Israel, I am much more the American than I was in America because I have my accent in Hebrew. And I also ended up gravitating to things that are very American because baseball is very American. So a lot of my friends are American as well, but I still feel Israeli. I still feel Israeli. I feel very much a part of it. I did army service. I did basic training. I did my army service. I went every year for Miluim. So I'm very much an Israeli. My wife is Israeli. My kids also live both worlds. And my kids are now older. I have a granddaughter already. But my kids, when they were growing up, they went every year, every summer, they went to the United States to visit their grandparents. And they're very much live in both societies in both worlds. My son was also a baseball player and he's a baseball coach now. But again, living here with all the problems recently and the political situation, everything, which is maybe not to my liking, it's still a situation where just being the Jewish people and being there together is very much in favor. And that's what I feel very much of a Zionist pride to be living in Israel, even today.
Ah, that's great. That's great. You share the story about the Jewish people, no? This kind of mix that born in some place and rise children in another place, and so that's the our destiny, you know, in journal. Very good. So what's your background in professional activity? What made you move to Israel? You share with us now. What share with a little bit about the decision maker process. It was clear, but in the end of the day, what was the final decision? What was so important for you to make this kind of decision, besides the fact that your wife is Israeli?
It helps that my wife is an Israeli. It helps in the integration. There's no doubt about it. Ironically, her background is also very mixed, just like all other Jewish people. Her mother is Hungarian and her father is Iraqi. Okay, so there you have that great mix of the Ashkenazi and the Sephardi coming together. My children are 25% Sephardi, 75% Ashkenazi, but that's the melting pot. That's the melting pot of Israel. When we were in the States, as I mentioned, for 1 year, that became 5 years, I started working for an Israeli company, a company called Koor Trade, Koor, K-O-O-R, which was the biggest company in Israel at the time. And we did all their marketing and trade in the United States for the Israeli companies. So naturally, when I went back to Israel, I got a job with one of the core companies, which was Hamat, which was the faucet company. They're a faucet manufacturer, a grifferia, I believe is the word in Spanish, not in Portuguese. I don't know Portuguese what the word is, but a faucet or a tap. And they're the biggest manufacturer in Israel. They also manufacture sinks, fire clay, toilets. So for many years, I was working for them as their export manager. About 10 years ago, I became independent. I also work with them, but I also work with other manufacturers in Israel who want to export their products, all different kinds of products that I export from Israel to the States, to Europe. And I'm also, again, working for baseball. I mean, what I do for baseball takes up a lot of my time today, a lot more of my time than my wife appreciates. You can imagine that being Israeli, she doesn't really know anything about baseball, except that her husband and her son are crazy about it, because my son is just as crazy as I am. But I'm able to somehow integrate my work together, my independent work of being a marketing person, together with my love for baseball and doing baseball. And it's very much of being, coming here to Israel and being sort of like a big fish in a small pond, or in America being a small fish in a large pond. So I chose to be here. I'm very much involved in the life of the industry here in Israel, all that's going on economically. My son also has a funds that he's taking care of, and investment and everything. And he's very successful as an investment banker. And we love the life in Israel. I mean, life for us is good here. As I mentioned, I have a granddaughter. She's 2 years old, perfect age. I was just picking her up today. Every Sunday, I pick her up from the gan, from the daycare, take her around for a couple of hours. We go to the playground and everything. And there's no doubt that is the height of my week, those 2 hours with my granddaughter.
That's beautiful. Very good. Very good. So we are not so familiar with the baseball in Brazil. Could you tell us about the origin of this sport? What are its main fundamentals besides the United States? In which other countries is the sport popular?
Okay, first of all, the origins of baseball. Baseball must be at least 150 to 180 years old. It's been around since the 1850s. It was originally in America, but today there are about 75 countries all over the world that play baseball, that are very involved with baseball, including European countries. There's about 35 countries in Europe. I was the vice president of European baseball, as well as being the president of baseball in Israel for 4 years. So baseball is popular, and obviously it's most popular in America. But even in America, the Major League Baseball is about 35–40% foreign. So Japan, it's a crazy sport. Japan, it's the #1 sport by far. In Korea, in all the countries around there, Taiwan, it's a very big sport. Also in Central America, in Dominican Republic, in Cuba, in Venezuela, in Colombia, it's very big. In South America, less so, although Brazil also has a national team. By the way, in 2016, in the WBC, in the World Baseball Classic, in the qualifiers in Brooklyn, Israel played against the UK, Pakistan, and Brazil, the Brazilian national team, which was at the time there was an American guy, Barry Larkin. He was the manager of the team. There were a lot of Japanese Brazilians on the team. I understand Brazil has a large Japanese population, so that's probably where the influence was. It came in there. And we defeated Brazil, luckily, 1-0, 1-0. It was a very close game until the last innings. And it's good that Israel defeated Brazil, because then we made the stepping stone up until the main tournament of the World Baseball Classic. But that we'll talk about later. But actually, Brazil has about 4 or 5 major leaguers. There's one very good guy, Jan Gomez. He's Brazilian. He was born in Sao Paulo, and he played baseball somehow in Brazil. I know that he went to the States, I think, when he was about 10 years old, and they moved to Miami. So I think maybe that's one of the reasons. But he grew up in Sao Paulo, and also in Israel today. We're having kids, grow up in Israel, learning the baseball in Israel. There's about 1,000 kids today playing baseball in Israel. We have an academy for the most talented players from the ages of 15 to 18. So we're building the program. We're building up the young people. I'm very proud of the Olympic team, which we'll talk about, but also our U18 team, our under 18 years old team. Last summer, they won the European Championship B pool. So this next summer, they'll be in the European Championship A pool. So they're also, and those are guys who only grew up in Israel. Some of the Olympic team is mostly American Jews. But these are guys who grew up in Israel, kids who grew up in Israel, learned baseball in Israel, and became very good at it. And a lot of countries are doing that. A lot of countries are falling in love with the sport. You don't have to be tall, especially like in basketball. You don't have to be fast, perhaps like in football. You need to have good hand-eye coordination. That's very important, because you have to hit the ball, and vision is very important. But it seems like a complicated game, but it's actually a simple game. I mean, you have to know how to throw, you have to learn how to catch, and you have to learn how to hit. That's it. Those are the 3 basic things. And for children, small children, you can break down all those basic things to very basic instructions and very basic training, and they can learn the sport quite quickly. When you go to a Major League Baseball game in America, there's a lot of it around it, a lot of the surrounding. You want a hot dog, and you want to drink a beer, and you want to go see some other things and see some, they have competitions and all kinds of different things going around, because it's not the fastest game. It's not football where people are running action all the time. There's breaks in the action. So it's a game of patience, and you have to be very patient to watch the game, but it's a very exciting game, really.
Very good, very good. Just to that the Japanese community here in Brazil, it's really big. If I'm not wrong, it's the second, the largest Japanese community besides the Japan. So that's a very important Japanese community. Very good, very good. Well, let's talk about your dream now. What did you dream when you were forming the Israeli baseball team? What was the level of this sport in Israel? You mentioned for us. Is there any international ranking?
There's an international ranking. Actually, I just looked up the international ranking yesterday. Brazil, what number is Brazil? I believe Brazil is number 17 in the world in baseball. Israel is number 18 in the world, which is really good, because 18 is high. And that's a good sign. That's a very important sign that 18, Israel is number 18. Just by
very
chance,
good.
to be 18, yeah.
We're supposed to have Israel 18. That's perfect. That's perfect.
Yeah, no, it's very, very good. To be honest, in international baseball, we belong to the European baseball division, because we're in Asia. Israel's in Asia, but obviously we cannot compete until now with other countries in Asia. I also don't want to compete with Asia, because Asia has Japan and has Korea. It also has the Arab countries, but Israel belongs to Europe. Although I want to mention something also, we're now working on a new tournament. We're going to be going to a tournament in March, where I'm taking 12-year-old teams, 12-year-old Israeli national team, to Dubai. So we're going to Dubai, and we're going to be playing there. And just yesterday, I was looking to see if Morocco has a baseball team, but they don't seem to have a baseball team. I don't know. Baseball hasn't caught on much in Morocco. I don't know if you heard the news, but maybe in Bhutan. Bhutan has 700,000 people, so I don't know if they have a baseball team either up in Bhutan, but I don't think so. But anyway, we're going to Dubai, so there is more relationship with our neighbors now. But Israel belongs in the European Association. We go for European championships. We were always in the B pool, someplace in the lower part of the B pool. In 2012, we received an invitation from Major League Baseball. They made the World Baseball Classic. The World Baseball Classic is like the Mondial in soccer, in football. So you have countries competing. And for the first time, they had a qualifier. So they invited us to come there, but their rules are a little bit different. Okay, the rules of the WBC says you do not have to have a citizenship. Okay, you just have to be eligible for citizenship. Okay, so maybe if somebody is Brazilian and they live in America and they never lived in Brazil, but maybe their grandmother was from Brazil and they can get Brazilian citizenship, then they can play for the Brazilian national team without having citizenship. So for Israel, any Jewish American can get citizenship in Israel right away because of the law of return. Anybody who has a Jewish grandparent can have citizenship. Also, anybody married to someone who has a Jewish grandparent can get citizenship. So that opens up a nice area for us. But basically, I mean, Israel has, what, 9 million people, and maybe there's another 8 or 9 million of Jews in America. So we're talking about a population group of maybe 17 million to go to the World Baseball Classic. So we put together a team in 2012. We went to the qualifiers. Unfortunately, we lost to Spain in the qualifiers. So that was finished. In 2016, as I mentioned, we went to Brooklyn, again to the qualifiers. The team was made up of about 23 Jewish American players and 3 Israelis, native Israelis with passports. But we won the qualifiers. 6 months later, we went to the main tournament in Korea. ESPN called us the Jamaican bobsled team because they thought we had no chance. They said Israel has no chance. What does Israel know about baseball? There are 16 teams. Israel's the last one. Israel will come in last. So we went to Korea. We beat the Korean national team. 12 hours later, we beat the Taiwanese national team. And 2 days later, we beat the Netherlands national team. And we were 3-0 in the first round. We went to the second round in Japan. And the next game, we beat the Cuban national team, which was amazing. I mean, that's just, the Cuban national team was a weak team. It wasn't such a strong team, but still, Cuba. Baseball is God in Cuba. Fidel Castro was a baseball player. You know, if Fidel Castro had a chance to be signed by the Yankees, if he was signed by the Yankees, there wouldn't be a revolution in Cuba, but it didn't happen. So we defeated the Cuban national team. Then we lost to Japan. We lost to the Netherlands. In the end, from 16 teams, we came in 6th place, which was very respectable. Israel was definitely on the map. People were talking about Israel. We got more coverage. In the United States, we got a lot of coverage. In Israel, we got some coverage, but there really wasn't that much because, again, it was a team of Jewish American players. They all were playing for Israel. They all had Israel on their chest, and they were very proud to play for Israel. But it was still, you know, how Israelis are very cynical. And they were saying, you know, it's not a Jewish, it's not an Israeli team. It's not Sabras. It's not Israelis.
It's so not basketball. It's not a basketball. It's not a basketball. That's
exactly. Although basketball team also, I mean, the Israel basketball team has plenty of Jewish Americans, Black Americans on the team, but that's besides the point. But they didn't really accept it. So in the sports world, they knew about it, the sports world in Israel. But then after the WBC, they came out about 6 months later with baseball coming back to the Olympics in Tokyo in 2020. So the announcement was made that baseball was last in the Olympics, I believe, in 2008. It was the last time, and they came back. It's coming back in 2020 because it's in Japan. So the Japanese can choose which sports they want. They wanted baseball, and it was made clear to everybody what the qualification would be. There would be 6 teams in baseball in the baseball tournament. There would be 1 team from Europe, and we were in the B pool. We were in the European Championship B pool. So we had to win 4 tournaments, the B pool, the playoffs, the A pool, come in the top 5, and then the European qualifiers. And I sat down and I made a roadmap, and I said, listen, this is what we have to do, and we have to start bringing Jewish American players on Aliyah, okay? Because for the Olympics, you have to have a passport. You have to be an Israeli. You have to be an Israeli citizen. So I spoke to 10 guys from the players who played for us in the WBC. And right away, they all said, you know, yeah, let's do it. I said to them, listen, this is what we have to do. In the summer of 2019, We have to play in 4 different tournaments in 4 different countries in Europe over 12 weeks. So you have to fly, you have to play, you have to go back, you have to bring you back, you have to go back, you have to come back and forth. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if we'll win, if we have any chances, but this is the chance to get to the Olympics. And 10 Jewish American players said right away yes. And we brought them to Israel and Aliyah in 2018. They all came to Israel. It's not an easy process. You really have to fill out the paperwork and everything. It's a lot of paperwork. You have to get a rabbi's letter. You have to bring FBI report. It's a process, but they all did it. Some of them had only one parent who was Jewish. Some of them had bar mitzvahs, but some of them didn't have bar mitzvahs. They had no connection to Judaism, but they all came. They got their citizenship. And then in 2019, I brought 4 more. And the team, and those 14 guys joined 8 native Israelis. And we went to Bulgaria, to the European Championship B pool. And there we played against Russia, against Greece, against Ireland. And Ireland brought Irish American players. Greece brought Greek American players that got Greek citizenship. Russia had 6 Cubans on the team. I don't know how Cubans become Russian citizens, but they had them. And we ended up winning that tournament. And then we had to go to Lithuania, and we had to play the Lithuanian team there. And then we went to the A pool, the European Championship A pool in September. And 4 more guys came to Israel to get citizenship. Among them, Danny Valencia. Danny Valencia was a major league player for 10 years. He was our best player from his background. His father is Cuban, Valencia. His father's Cuban, but his mother's Jewish, and his father converted to get married to his mother. So Danny had a bar mitzvah. We had pictures from his bar mitzvah and everything. So he came to Israel. He made Aliyah. We went to Germany to play in the A pool. And for an Israeli national team to go to Germany was emotional for many guys. I mean, my parents, as I mentioned, were Holocaust survivors. Many of the players, their grandparents were Holocaust survivors. So there was some inner feelings, emotions about going to Germany. Obviously, we have protection. Also, the Israeli Secret Service covers the team and everything. I don't have to mention that. We went there. We ended up winning the games that we had to win. The top 5 teams from the European Championship, from 16 teams, the top 5 teams the following week went to Italy to play in the Olympic qualifiers. So we came in 4th place. Netherlands won, and then Italy, and then Spain, and then Israel, and then Czech Republic. So the 5 teams went to Italy the following week. The first game we played Spain. We defeated Spain. The second game we played Netherlands, the number 1 team, a week ago from Europe. We defeated them. The third team was Italy. In Italy, we played Italy. There were maybe 5,000 people in the stadium. 4,900 were cheering for Italy, and maybe 100 were cheering for Israel. But we defeated Italy. So after the 3 games, we defeated the top 3 teams of Europe. And afterwards, Israel defeated South Africa. And we were the Olympic team from Europe to qualify for the Olympics. So it was an amazing thing that the guys did. Again, it's very important for the Brazilian Jewish community to understand that. The way the Jewish American players bought into it, I like to say they drank from the juice. They bought into it, and they came and they became Israeli. They were very proud of being Israeli. They all came to Israel. Now it's at least twice they've been to Israel. They went out, they give clinics to all the kids and everything. The kids love them here in Israel. They're, Twitter and Facebook and emails back and forth with them and everything. They're really role models for them. And they really helped us with baseball in Israel. And there were, now they're all back in America. There's actually 1 person here still, but they're all going to come back and forth. I don't think anybody's going to live in Israel, maybe after they retire, but they have to play baseball in America. They cannot play the level of baseball they play in Israel. But they're all very enthusiastic and want to help and everything. And now we had to wait another year for the Olympics because the Olympics was delayed a year because of the corona. And it's difficult for some of the guys because many of them did not play baseball last year at all, the minor leagues and the independent leagues. So it's difficult for them. But now hopefully things will start up again now. There'll be vaccine and they'll start up again. And Team Israel is ready. We're ready to compete for a medal in the Olympics. No doubt about it.
So that's great. So we can dream the idea to maybe Israel is going to be good in Tokyo. It's going to play
Not maybe. Not
Not
maybe,
maybe,
for
for
sure. We're going
sure.
to win a medal.
Wow,
I don't want to say which medal, but we're going to win a medal. I guarantee it.
wow, that's very good to listen. That's great.
Mhm.
I'm gonna follow. I'm gonna start to follow baseball now, huh? Okay.
Okay. It's very important for us for the program in Israel because, Israelis, not there have been 9 Olympic medals from Israelis in the Olympics over the years. The first was Yael Arad with judo, and judo now
Hmm.
is a huge sport in Israel, and
Sure.
every Israeli knows who won the medals. And this is the first time that there will be a team sport for 42 years in the Olympics. Okay, the last time there was a team sport was in Montreal in 19 whatever 78 with the soccer team with the football team. So this is the first team sport for Israel in the Olympics in 45 years. So it's very
Uh-huh.
important for Israel also, and they don't know how to eat it really because I mean, the Israeli Federation, the IOC in Israel, they know Yael Arad, they know individuals. Okay,
Okay.
we're very strong in gymnastics, in judo, we're very strong, but they don't understand a team. I told them we have, okay, so who are the 24 guys in the team? I said, I don't know. We have 35 players, and I have to choose 24 now. I don't know who the
Okay.
24 are going to be. We have to see what happens during the season with them in the season.
Uh-huh.
What happens with them? But we're going to have a training camp in April, hopefully in Arizona, and then also in July before we go to Tokyo in the northeast of the United States, and we play exhibition games and everything, and then we'll choose the players that will come with the team, with the national team.
That's great. Very good. Very good to know this. Please, share with us a little bit about. Can you imagine the one day a baseball championship take place in the Middle East with Israel, with non-Muslim team, with Muslim team? How do you think this is feasible and possible? I know you mentioned you don't like politics, but I'm trying to mix the dream to have this possibility. How do you consider this possibility?
Listen, with what's going on today, UAE, United Arab Emirates, Bahrain, Morocco, who knows who will be next? They say Oman will be next, maybe Saudi Arabia. But to be honest with you, all these countries do not have much of a level of baseball. Dubai a little bit, and Saudi Arabia only because they have many expatriates. It's not the local people. It's not the Muslim people. The ones in Dubai where we're going to the tournament are Canadian, American, and English and German. They're not the Dubai, the local people. So the local people do not have much baseball there. There is actually baseball in the Gaza Strip. You'd be surprised, but they play baseball in the Gaza Strip. And at one time, I was in communication with them a little bit, but the politics in Israel today, it's very difficult with the Gaza Strip to do anything, to have any kind of contact with them. We do have baseball in the Arab community in Israel. We have a program called Baseball for All, Baseball Lekulam, where we bring together Jewish Israelis and Arab Israelis, and they play baseball together. We have there's a community, a village up in the north of Israel, where they have a couple of baseball teams and they play in our leagues. And we definitely, the Israel national team is open to anybody who's Israeli national. Jewish, Muslim, Christian, doesn't matter as long as they have Israeli citizenship. They can play for us. No Muslim is yet at that level, but we're definitely looking to see if Muslims can be at that level and play there. I really don't think that there will be an Israeli, a Middle Eastern baseball tournament just because baseball is not a Middle Eastern sport. It's more football. Is probably the better chance to have a football tournament. We're going to Dubai because it's interesting and it's fun and it will be in the news and maybe we can raise some money from it. And we would be the first Israeli national team to go to Dubai because we're going in March, just before Pesach. We're going to be there for a week. And now we called it together. We called it the Fields of Peace Tournament. So we're making a logo and everything. It will come out in about a week. In about a week, it will be made public. So don't anybody who watches this, don't say anything yet. Be quiet. But we're going to come out with it, and that will be our cooperation in the Arab area, in the Muslim areas. But to be honest with you, our vision is more towards Europe, towards America, towards Asia, where baseball is much more popular, and maybe towards South America as well. Maybe with Brazil we could have some exchange programs. That would be very interesting.
Okay, good. So, what do you know about Brazil? What are your reference? Tell us a little bit about what you know about.
Uh, I don't know that much about Brazil. I mean, I traveled around the world a lot. I've traveled in South America. I've traveled to Argentina, to Peru, to Colombia, to Ecuador. So I've been around Venezuela. Um, but to Brazil, I've never been. I always said to myself, Brazil is the one place where I want to go just to Brazil. If I go to South America, I only go to Brazil to travel around Brazil. Um, Also in Central America, I've been to Costa Rica and to Guatemala and to Mexico. But I'd love to go to Brazil. I definitely like to go to Brazil. I was actually in Brazil, I must say, because when I was in Argentina, we went to Iguazu, and when we were in the water, they said now we're on the Brazilian side. So I was in Brazil at that when I was on the Brazilian side of Iguazu. Um, but I mean, the usual stereotypes that Brazilians have in the eyes of people: the Amazon jungle, the beautiful women, the beautiful beaches, football, soccer, football, of course, and also a very warm Jewish community. I mean, from what I've read about it, the Jewish community is very warm in Brazil. Actually, we had somebody here. He was the CEO of the baseball, and his wife was from Brazil. So, and she was fantastic. I mean, really, good people and very nice people and very warm and open people, a lot like Israelis, very much so. No doubt about
Very good. You have a good reference. Good. Please, what do you tell a child or a teenager, boy or girl here in Brazil who wants to become a baseball player? What would be your three top piece of advice?
it. Okay, first of all, the most important thing is probably to find a good coach. To find a good coach who can coach him, who can teach him the finer points of baseball. Certainly at a younger age, it's more of the basic skills, but at a later age, it becomes much more psychological, much more mental approach to the game. It's very important that the mental approach to the game. Um, the second thing is to work hard, to be dedicated to playing baseball, to work hard, to practice often. Baseball is very much of a sport that you have to rely on instincts. You have to know, not to think too much, just to be able to catch the ball, to throw it quickly. What can you do? Different situations. It has to be instinctual. So you have to practice a lot. You have to really be dedicated, and practice a lot, and work long hours, and do everything again and again and again. A lot of repetition is very important. So the body becomes doing it in a natural way. And the third thing is to get a good education, because the level of Brazilian baseball is such that if you're a good student and you're a good baseball player, as in Israel, hopefully you can go to a college in America, in the States. And if you can go to a college in the States to study, to get your degree, and also to play baseball, we have today four Israelis who are playing college ball in the United States. And I don't think any of them will make it a career. In Israel, you have to be in the army for 3 years. So all our kids between 18 to 21 have to go into the army. And these guys in college are 22, 23, 24 years old. So they won't have much of a professional career, but they will get a college education. And that's what's important, to get a college education from playing baseball. By the way, also when the Army allows certain players to have special dispensations as baseball players, also athletes, other athletes, football players and basketball players, of course, but we have about 4 or 5 baseball players at one time. So they go to the Army for about 4 or 5 hours a day, and the rest of the time they can do their sport. And that's important, because the 3 years when you're in the Army, from 18 to 21, is the 3 most important years of a career. So at least they can do their sport. They can do a little bit there. They can also go overseas for 90 days a year, up to 90 days a year. So they can go overseas and do things. So the Army is very flexible with them. The Army allows them to do these kind of things, and that's important. But the same thing to a kid growing up in Brazil, to work hard, and hopefully at the age of 18, he can go to America and play in a college and play in a better atmosphere, and succeed in baseball.
Very good. Very good. Thank you. It's possible to develop a foundation for baseball culture in any place. So how do you see this? What's your perception about this?
I tell you, here in Israel, I think also in Brazil, a lot of the sports culture is very male dominated. Is very violent. I mean, football, for example, the way football is played in Israel, also in Europe, in England for sure. I assume also in Brazil and Argentina. The people you see at the games are all males, 95% male, and 95%, yelling and screaming and kill the referee and kill the other team and things like that. Baseball is different. Baseball, we try to make it a different climate. We try to make it more family oriented. Come together with the family. Come together with your kids. Bring your kids there. Bring your daughters there. We have in Israel, as I mentioned, about 1,000 players. We have about 20 or 30 girls also playing. Not many, but still there's girls playing. There's also softball. Softball is a separate sport. There's 3 girls softball teams, so they also play softball. But in baseball, we have about 20 or 30 girls playing among the men, and we try to encourage that. I think it's the same thing in America. In America, they try to make it more of a family thing, bring the family to the ballpark, come to have hot dogs and beer and whatever, and bring the whole family. I think baseball in Central America is different, is much more like soccer in Central America, like football. But in Israel, we're trying to make it more of a family kind of thing. And that's important because we want to put values. I mean, becoming a leader, for example, leadership in a baseball team is very important. And we try to encourage our young people, our young kids to be leaders, to lead by example. We belong to an association that tries to build leadership through sports, and that's very important. Independence. So we try to build things differently than the other sports in Israel. I'm not so sure we're succeeding, but we're trying to succeed. Hopefully again, that's also part of the baseball here in Israel is not totally Anglo-Saxon, okay, American, but probably about at least 30 or 40 or 50% of it is American, but 50% is Israeli, native Israelis. But a lot of the more advanced kids, the more advanced levels, the national team levels are more ex-Americans. So they bring that also, they bring that kind of atmosphere with them as well. Baseball is also a sport. I mean, you play every day. In the major leagues, they have 160 games. So, it's not like maybe football where you play once a week or twice a week, where every game is important. You have to, games are important, but there's also tomorrow and there's the next day, and you have to worry about that. And you have to go forward to them. It's not a life-threatening thing. So that's also very important. And we're trying to teach lessons. That's what's important for us with the kids.
Very good. Very interesting. I didn't know about this. Thank you. Well, we are at the beginning of Hanukkah season. Tell us a little bit about your relationship with this traditional of Hanukkah season. What is related to you? What you do in Hanukkah season?
Well, basically, I mean, ironically, since I moved to Israel, I became less religious. Okay, because when I was growing up in New York, I wasn't Shomer Shabbat, but I used to go every Shabbat with my father to synagogue, and then I would come home and watch the baseball game on television. But I would still go to synagogue on Shabbat. When I moved to Israel, because you're here in Israel, you don't have to go to synagogue on Shabbat because there's no need for that. The God is over you, is protecting you anyway because you live here. So Shabbat is also only one day. It's only one weekend. It's 1 day weekend, so you have to take advantage of it to do other things. But certainly Hanukkah is the kind of holiday. In America, when I was in America, it was different because Hanukkah, you had to compete with Christmas. So it was also very important for the Jewish people to make Hanukkah a much bigger holiday than it is in Israel. In Israel, it's a minor holiday. You light the candles, it's fun. It's nice to light the candles. You sing the Hanukkah songs. You eat sufganiyot, which are like jelly donuts. You also eat latke levivot. But basically, it's not the same holiday as Rosh Hashanah or Pesach. Those are much bigger holidays. It's more of a minor holiday, more for the kids. I was with my granddaughter the other day. We lit the candles. She tried to blow out the candles because she knows from birthdays that right away you light the candle and you blow it out. So you have to try to teach her not to blow out the candles.
It's understandable.
Yeah, no, she wants to blow it out. That's what she knows for the last 2 years. for whatever it's
Exactly.
but it's it's a nice holiday in Israel. Again, now with the corona and everything, it's more difficult. It's more of a problem. Let's put it this way. Last year it was much better. Hopefully next year it will also be much better. The corona, by the way, this week they're already starting to give vaccines.
Sure.
Israel will have, I don't know, 4 or 5 million vaccines within the next month or so. So for some miraculous way, Israel is going to be probably the first country to vaccinate the entire population, which is fantastic, which was great for us. I know in Brazil you have a leader there who's very similar to Trump in the United States. At least the Americans got rid of Trump. I don't know about the Brazilians getting rid of their leader, but I know that the situation in Brazil is also very, very difficult.
Sure.
Hopefully, within 6 months, the whole world will be finished with the corona and everything will be over with, and then we can move forward. But it's nice having Hanukkah here. It's the third candle tonight, and it's a very, very nice holiday. And I have Hanukkah greetings from Israel to everybody in Brazil who's watching this now.
Thank you, thank you. We are closing to our nice conversation. Please feel free to make your final remarks, final comments to us.
The only thing I want to say is, listen, I mean, we're a small country, the Jewish people. We're a small nation, okay? The Jewish people in Brazil, the Jewish people in America, the Jewish people in Israel, maybe 20 million people all over the world. I know that our influence is much greater than that, but we're really small, and we have to be together. And I think the Israel national baseball team, the Olympic baseball team, is an example, a great example of how the American Jewish players are coming together with their Israeli brothers, their Israeli baseball brothers, and able to build a team that can compete in an international forum, international stage. I mean, the Olympics are the biggest stage that can be. And because we have 20 American Jewish baseball players who made Aliyah, who made the actual process of becoming Israeli citizens, not living in Israel, but becoming Israeli citizens, visiting often, being part of the program, being part of us, going together to Tokyo to represent Israel. They're taking a big chance. I mean, they're going to represent Israel, which means that each of those players has a target on their back. Obviously, we're not the most desired people in the world. And they're telling everybody they're Jewish, okay? And Jews are also not very much liked in the world, unfortunately. But they're coming, and that kind of cooperation between the Jewish Americans and the Israeli Jewish people is the kind of cooperation that I'd like to see among other Jewish people. I know a lot of Brazilians come to Israel and support Israel, and are very strong supporters of Israel. And hopefully will come in Aliyah. More and more Brazilians will come in Aliyah. But it's also important to be in Brazil and to influence things that are going on in Brazil. Right now, the team has to be self-funded. We have a budget of about $1 million for expenses from now until the Olympics. We want to have the camps, and we want to have the camps in the States, and we have to get uniforms, we have to get training and everything. We have to fly different places. About 20-25% will be funded by the Israeli government. Unfortunately, the Israeli government does not have many resources to help fund it. And also, anybody who knows about the Israeli government knows that the budget that they're working on now in almost 2021 is the same budget as they had in 2018. Okay, because the governments have not, 4 different governments have not been able to pass a budget. So in 2018, there was no Israeli team going to the Olympics. And we have a team of 24 players and 10 coaches. That's 34 players that we have to almost fund by ourselves. So perhaps when this is shown, we can also show the website where we can donate money, where we can get donors to donate money. It'd be great if people could donate money to help us get the team there. We're also building fields in Israel, baseball fields in Israel, as I mentioned in the beginning, in Beit Shemesh and Renana. There's tractors there on the Beit Shemesh field right now for phase 1 of the Beit Shemesh field. We have basically 1 baseball field in Israel, in Petach Tikva with lights. And we're building 2 new fields. So we need funding also to build those 2 new fields. And there's a saying in English, if you build it, they will come. And that's why we're building the fields, because when a child comes and sees the baseball field and, also a football field, same thing, but he sees a big green grassy area and he sees people playing and action going on there, it makes it a much different feeling than when he comes and sees a a soccer field or an empty lot or something and is just playing there. It's a field that's dedicated to baseball. And if anybody who's watching this right now comes to Israel in the next year or 2 years or 3 years and wants to come see a game, please get in touch with me. Be happy to host you at a game, to have you there. And just happy Hanukkah to everybody. I don't know when this will be shown, if it will be shown on Hanukkah or after Hanukkah, but happy Hanukkah and Happy New Year to everybody, and to all my Brazilian fans out there. Please help support us, and thank you very much.
Okay, Peter, thank you very much for your participation. Whenever you want to visit in Brazil, we'll be delighted to welcome you, take you to the soccer stadium to watch a game, and take you around to show you this beautiful country. And I wish my best and good luck to your team, and happy Hanukkah. Thank you very much.